We have a meeting again, Kurt. We're recording.
How are you, you handsome devil?
I'm ready to go again. I'm all raring to go.
I'm scared.
What are you scared of, Kurt?
I spent the past hour trying to make sure that I am caught up with what we did in our last grid online,
Yes.
and I'm not, and I'm not sure I know how to. I just finished getting caught up at 3 minutes before 11.
Okay.
And I'm not quite sure how to attack the rest of the problem. I'm sure we'll figure it out.
Okay.
Do you have any warm-up stuff today?
I don't. It's kind
What's wrong with you?
I know, right? It's like my coffee's cool. I took a nap. I rested up and just called, just sent your link out, and here we are. So I thought we had a nice chat yesterday. It was kind of unusual, and I enjoyed looking at the graph of that you are generating on the spreadsheet there, talking about the
Evolution of leftism.
the evolution of the lies. It's like, wow, it's quite an interesting piece of work.
Well, Hicks did it in the 90s, which is where I got aware of him, Stephen Hicks. And he wrote the book Explaining Postmodernism, which put it all together for me.
Oh,
if you look at Lindsay work, what he's doing is just adding he's adding leaves to that tree. He's adding branches and leaves to that tree. I think that what Hicks tried to do is show how both sides came together and what problems they encountered. In other words, at one point, Khrushchev gives, I can't remember exactly when it was. This isn't the 20th century, isn't my thing. But the Khrushchev gives what's called the secret speech, and it exposes all the horrors that Stalin did, and this caused a great kerfuffle in the communist community and a rapid decline in membership in most communist organizations. Now, Khrushchev might have multiple reasons for having done this. The Georgians didn't like it because, of course, Stalin was Georgian.
right.
So there was a reason. So they caused, that act caused the part of the West that had that had looked at communism favorably to see under the covers.
Oh,
Khrushchev did it, of course, because he wanted to consolidate power, and that was probably, or because that's what you need over there. And he did it because he wanted to create himself as a more virtuous, actor, which comparatively he was. I mean, obviously,
low bar.
Which is what you're talking about, Stalin. Mao was stupid, Hitler was wrong, and Stalin was evil.
Well,
I mean, it really works pretty much like that. So Stalin was it's a pretty low bar to improve on Stalin, but I mean, I was just in I get depressed just thinking about it. In Kiev, there's a restaurant that humorously goes back to Stalin times.
Oh my.
It's sort of like our version of the medieval medieval restaurant, so to speak, or the
Right,
colonial restaurant.
right,
Anyway, there's all these books by Stalin, like all over the place, whatever. And the same thing. There's a in downtown Moscow. I'm sorry, I wouldn't. My memory isn't going there, but downtown Moscow, there's one of those uh, enormous restaurants that was the reserve for the the party
right,
superiors or the elites, and yeah, they're very communist. They have their own, a really fancy wood paneled restaurant for the elites, in the French style, of course, which is the most opulent that there is.
that's right.
So, or you can get a little, the Italians can overdo it, but the French just get to the border of overdoing it. Anyway, so so you sit there and it's the same thing. Is this sort of nostalgia for those times? But yeah, there's no, and I well, I can understand the peasantry saying yes, but he modernized us. I'm like, the fucking monarchy was modernizing you fast, and they weren't killing millions of you to do it, and just
Yeah,
and and I was sort of reading something Kirkpatrick wrote yesterday, and she said, well, the there's a difference between authoritarian and totalitarian. And I just love this disambiguation. Authoritarian sort of runs things without your participation, but it stays out of daily life,
right,
right? And totalitarian involves itself in daily life, and you know, and that's a great distinction. And I don't know why I haven't used it myself before, but Stalin was such a totalitarian, and to some degree, that's still happened. That's what we see in. That's what we, those when somebody says, "Is that a Republican, authoritarian, or totalitarian?" Right? Um, excuse me, Republican, oligarchic, authoritarian, or totalitarian. I forgot one, right? Oligarchic. Um, the really only bad one is totalitarian, because they think they know more. They think they know enough to re-engineer society, right? Whereas the rest of them are like, I'm just trying to get shit done.
right,
These are, and in an authoritarian government, you're like, well, I gotta, this is the only way I can get it done. And oligarchic government is prosperous enough that they have incentives to get it done. And a Republican government is has to be wealthy enough that you need to use feathers to get it done. Incentive, right? So whereas the totalitarians, they just think they're smart, and that's like, Mao and his fucking sparrows. I mean, what a moron. I mean, kills the fucking birds, and what happens is that there's nothing to eat the goddamn bugs, right? I mean, it's just the guy was. I mean, if the number of stupid things that came out of that man's mouth,
Hmm.
it's amazing to me. So it's like I said, Mao was stupid. Hitler was wrong, and Stalin was fucking evil, right? I mean, and and even Hitler, I have a hard time being too. I mean, my major criticism, I'll probably get shot for this because people
oh my,
run with it. Would I say, claiming I'm saying what I'm not saying, but fascism in general is just basically the militarization of the total state. Now, in other words, Napoleon invents total war, but he doesn't include culture in it because he's not trying to defend the culture. But the fascists, they take total war to include culture.
yeah,
right? Because there's cultures being attacked. And so I'm like, well, I mean, I don't really sure that there were not I don't have a lot of good things to say. But I can't, I mean, I don't look at it as ridiculous, right? I mean, it was not stupid, right? I'm not even sure it started out evil. I think it started out as a demand for restitution, given that Napoleon had destroyed German civilization. I just see that like as for what it is. Yeah, but you know, you go to Stalin, and that fucking guy was evil. And you look what Mao did. I mean, he was just fucking stupid. I mean, what an ego you've got to have to think you're that smart. You know, and what an ego does a guy like Stalin have to do that much evil? I mean, I just can't comprehend that. When the monarchy in Russia was doing honestly just fine, they were modernizing. Like, we forget that basically like the Bronze Age explodes in the Mesopotamian region, right? The trade routes between the great, from Egypt to the Indus, the great trade routes between the river civilizations, right? So the Bronze Age explodes out of that area because it's wealthy enough, and it's wealthy because of trade, right? And it's trade that can create elites, and elites can create craftsmen, and craftsmen can, you know, so that explosion radiated out across the world. Well, we forget that same explosion radiated out from the coastal, you know, Atlantic Europe over to Russia. And so you saw the English and the French doing their thing, and the Germans say, "Hey, we got to get on, you know, board with this," and they try to be good at things, right? That's their whole thing. The Germans are still at that. That's how we have to be better than everybody else, right? And then the Germans start domesticating Eastern Europe by trade, right? And so then it starts to make its way to the Russians. But the Russians at this point, they've been winning by conquest,
Right.
not by trade. And so they get pissed at this sort of, well, you're you know, you're doing this kind of thing. Well, yeah, because you're bad, right? And then the freaking the monarchy, the Russian monarchy, is pretty smart. They're like, hey, we got to modernize. Well, they were doing what China's doing and India are doing. They're rapidly modernizing. And we get the goddamn First World War. What a clusterfuck. And this blows up the whole goddamn thing. And the Marxists are out there, and they can use the chaos of the war to get power and screw up the next fucking century. So, sort of like how the Persians and the Romans were fighting, and they screwed each other up enough that the Arabs could seize the opportunity. And that's all. We're just going through the same freaking cycle all over again. It's so annoying.
Allow me to take the moment to introduce this episode as
Are
2055.
you telling me you're glad I shut up finally?
No, I'm just
Yeah, you are. You said, yeah, Doodle will finish his little fucking rant there. Now I can.
That was a good rant. Hit like, hit subscribe, hit the notification bells, and leave the comments, please. That was an excellent review. But see, it's like this. The presumption is this screwed up the 20th century. And it's like, this is a very value-based judgmental statement, which is, it screwed it up for some and it made it better for others. The people who infested and infused the 20th century did quite well. The financiers of the international system, the globalists.
We lifted a lot of people out of poverty, but the point I'm making and everybody else makes is that we're largely spending down culture that was developed pre-war.
Yes.
And even our concept of science, the scientific method, rational thought, this was all pre-war thought. And the generations that were educated during that period up through the 30s, they were quite capable. But after that, it went. I mean, it's really obvious if you look at the rate of progress that we're basically spending down. And you know, if you just look at physics, which I rail at all the time, is it's made no progress since the 70s, and all the progress that was made before or just prior to the Second World War, and we've had minor, but it's not clear that people think as clearly as they used to. I know they don't. And so all sorts of things went. I mean, I'm not going to go through it now, but like I said, everything went fucking wrong, and you can see it. So you say, well, we rescued the world from poverty. Well, that's true, right? But is what we rescued them from a product of the post-war period, or is the post-war period the time at which those pre-war
That's right.
ideas were able to
Bear fruit.
finally mature and bear fruit?
Yeah.
And it's the latter. And so, you know, this whole, it's like, would you rather have preserved Greece and Rome than rather just Rome? Of course you would. Would you rather have preserved Egypt and North Africa and the Levant and Mesopotamia and Anatolia and Persia than have them destroyed by the Muslim invasion, destroy their arts, letters, cultures? Of course you would. So I don't know. I mean, I look at it as like, well, I'd rather have Europe. I'd rather have the Anglosphere, the continental armies of Europe, and the naval alliance of the Anglosphere, and the world would be a better place for that, because Europe, most of the Germans wouldn't have turned into wet noodles.
I understand you, and I'm merely making that as someone preferred it this way, is my point. The beta team prefers this form. So it depends on what side of the table you're sitting on.
How come we have this fucking role? Excuse me, I did it again. How come we have this role reversal?
I don't know. I don't know what it is. I noted it yesterday too.
How is this role reversal going on?
Oh, it's going to be all right.
Is it?
It's going to be all right.
I don't know. It's like that Star Trek episode or whatever it is.
Strange episode.
You switch brains. I don't know what that's from. Is that Star Trek or
something
is
like that?
Is that Outer Limits or something? I don't know.
Science fiction shows.
Anyway. Somebody unironically asked me on Quora if time travel had been tested. This is like the stuff I can't.
Has it been tested?
I can't stand it. You know, it's like this is like, why do we get out of like 5th grade and not understand?
It's the modern moment is a little bit confusing, I'm afraid.
You know, it's like I remember, I think I've said this before. I remember growing up, there were still adults in the workforce who were illiterate.
Yes.
Now, I haven't seen one of those in a really long time. I suppose they might still exist. I know there are people who have trouble reading.
I met a fellow who was working a factory with me that had a 3rd grade education.
Right.
And I met another guy. This was an interesting character. He was an independent carpenter, and he had a 6th grade education.
Yes.
And he could make a building. He could make a barn, a hardwood barn, from his mind.
Yes.
He could see it and make it.
Yep.
I said, you could have a team of guys and make a barn. He goes, I don't want to have a team of guys.
I've heard that from so many carpenters. And the answer is that the the communication burden, this is really what it comes down to. The communication burden is so high that they'd rather do it themselves. And I said, well, that's true, but what they really need is they need a chick and runners.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah.
I need somebody to go to the freaking store and get these things.
That's right.
Right. And I need a chick to talk to them. Cause right. And so it's sort of, this turns out to be that actually seems to be the right recipe. It's how I use secretaries, right? I mean, it's the same thing. But I've had this conversation with one of my family, actually, a guy who's a carpenter in my family. He's my sister. It's not blood; he's by marriage, and the guy is incredible. He's Italian. He's incredibly talented, but he's extremely unlikable, and he has no patience, and he lacks the ability to articulate his ideas. So he thinks spatially. But when he draws stuff or builds stuff, it's freaking flawless. And I just think it's hysterical that that's the case. But anyway, when I was a kid growing up, there were still, when I was in my teens, I can think of a couple guys in particular that were illiterate. There's nothing wrong with them. They're just illiterate. So I just view it as the present day shift. In other words, we shift from illiteracy, where people knew they didn't know anything, to literacy, where they know they don't know.
False impression. They know stuff.
They know stuff, and that's actually what I think is going on.
Yes, the illusion of knowledge.
The illusion
even worse than that is the illusion of actual thought.
Oh, that's just like, okay, don't get me started on that one.
Okay.
Because how many people do thinking?
I think it's remarkably few, to be honest.
How many people do thinking? How many people think?
That's it.
A lot of us associate.
Yes.
A lot of us wayfind. I'm not really sure there's a lot of thinking going on. Because thinking means adversarial competition between paths. And in order to have adversarial competition between paths, you have to know enough to be able to falsify whatever it is that you're thinking about. So when you think that you have a vague understanding of things, that's great. Now you overextend that ability. My favorite example being economists, which I bring it up all the time, or scientists for that matter. I hear this increasingly from scientists. What you hear from a good scientist is, I don't know these things. I don't know that material, right? Like I just said, the 20th century isn't my thing, right? I mean, I should say the Cold War isn't my thing. But anyway, the people tend to extrapolate their knowledge, right? And it takes a lot of intellectual honesty to not. And so we've tried this Dunning-Kruger test on a lot of people, and Martin's always throwing this at me. And it turns out that people are better at saying, I don't know, than we think. The problem is when you look at the questions, it's like the same problem with IQ and personality tests. It's trying to look at the same thing across things instead of categories, right? So what happens is it depends on which question you ask. If you ask questions about morals, they'll overstate their knowledge, right? And if you ask a question about the sciences, they won't, because they don't have an interest. Right? And it's the same thing with IQ tests. If you ask a systematizing question or a verbal question, verbal picture question, you'll discover the differences between males and females, right? Especially at the margins. So what we do is we try to find questions that provide symmetric values. In other words, commensurability. But we don't search for values that provide disambiguation. So there's these really fascinating malincentives in the 20th century search for equality.
Yes.
Anyway, so I'm getting way off track now, but I'm feeling warmed up again. I'm feeling warmed up now.
Yes.
I'm going to cut out that little rant about Republican, oligarchic,
Authoritarian.
and totalitarian, because that's a pretty good one. That's a nice little clip. And there's another,
It is a nice cutout. That's
and there was another one, Maoist stupid.
Yes.
Maoist stupid, Hitler was wrong and Stalin was evil. Yeah. I still don't get the whole demonization of, I guess I'm not emotionally involved in it, but as I just look at the whole Nazi thing, I just don't, I mean, I don't know why they're any worse than anybody else.
I know why, and I think you have an inkling of it, but you're not admitting to it, which is kind of interesting. Which is it gave advantage to a faction.
Well, what is the
It
nation?
was a great leverage advantage gained by the Semites in America. And
Oh, I see.
20th
Yeah, in other words,
century
the demonization of the Nazis was all right. Okay, I get that. So in other words, that's a constructed, because if I just look at it, I mean, because this is what happens is that if you just look at it, I'm like, I don't. You can look at it as if they're like doing this out of nowhere, and I'm like, well, that's not happening. I mean, there's a reason for the Germans to behave like this.
That's right. But the reason is casually overlooked by the people who are seeking to gain propaganda advantage in the latter half of the 20th century.
Role reversal again. I don't know what the hell happened to you, man?
Pardon me?
Role reversal. What the hell happened?
It's fascinating to me. I don't know, Kurt.
Seriously, this is
what's interesting to me,
blowing my mind.
It's Marcuse and Herbert Marcuse was intelligence officer in the United States military.
Yes.
And then he used that to engage in psychological warfare against the United States, the people of the Western civilization, in the latter half of the 20th century, and that's what he did.
Marcuse is, or when was he? Hold on, let me see if I can find it.
It should be in your taxonomy.
I just don't. One of the things I'm adding to the taxonomy right now is the date range where these people were working.
He was writing in the 60s.
Is that true?
Herbert Marcuse.
No, I'm just looking at it.
Yeah.
Between 43 and 50, he worked in the office at OSS, right?
Yeah.
He criticized the ideology of the Communist Party. In the 60s and 70s, he was the preeminent theorist of the New Left. Yeah, but the problem is the New Left is still left. I've added the New Left to my. And I'm trying to show in that grid. I don't know if I have it up here.
Hang on, let's do this thing here. Pull your participants up. I'm going to make you the host, and it's going to stop the recording. And I'm going to make you the host, and then you can give me permission to record again, okay? I'm going to stop the recording. All right, we're back in business.
Okay, so will you want me to share my screen?
If you want, you have permission.
So let's make sure we want to share that. So I'm trying to take my previous grid and expand it out. And what I want to show, and you're going to like this, is the convergence of Christian and Jewish leftism,
Oh,
just as we saw convergence in the diamond. And so like I've added the new left here, right?
right.
Right. And I'm trying to get the whole, you know, I'll get the whole thing here across it as I go through. So I'm just trying to add I've been trying to add the date range. I think I might have screwed up
So
this.
I would say this, there's an effort across time focused on the erosion of the Catholic Church and its influence that is to be considered in this as well, because the Catholic Church is eventually worn down, and
It's both. It's trying to you gotta it's a war against all institutions.
yes,
So they're undermining the aristocracy. They're undermining the church, and they're undermining rule of law.
right,
They're going after all three dimensions of our triangle, right? And so all three of them. And so and they do this by division, right? They create division, they foment division by creating narratives of oppression. So that's why you hear complaints against capitalism. We don't do capitalism, we do rule of law. Capitalism is a Jewish invention, as we see in Rothbard and Rand. They undermine an aristocracy. What's aristocracy? It's the military. In other words, the military as the decider of last resort. They undermine the church. What's the church? The church is the feminine side, which creates the family and morality. So you have family, morality, property, and state, right? And so they're undermining all three axes of the triangle. And they do that by attacking the church, by attacking the aristocracy, and by attacking rule of law. And so it's a complete war against our institutions of cultural production. But anyway, we were going to say something a minute ago. You started out with Marcuse.
yeah, Marcuse, and you put him in there, and you said you were putting time in there.
I'm putting time here. I'm putting this, and so he's really 60s and 70s.
Yeah.
And so what I of course want to do, if I can find it here real quickly, I'll bring it up, is I want to bring up Stephen Hicks, postmodernism. And if I click on that, I'm going to see some images. And if I see images, I will see his Enlightenment vision and his postmodernism. So here, can I share this now? Can I go?
I think so.
If I can do share screen. Share screen. I want to go to Chrome. Share that. So if you look at,
There we go.
What I got from Hicks was he's developed this genealogy, or what do you call it, ontology,
Yeah.
of the different methods, right? All right, how the evolution of the Enlightenment vision. He's also done this one, which is the evolution of the socialist strategies. All right, and he's where's the failure? He has one where it shows the failure. Oh, here it is. Failure is right here. So classical Marxist socialism, wait for the masses to revolt, wait for capitalism to collapse. It
failed.
Right? Try an intellectual vanguard, the industrial version, which is Lenin. Try an intellectual vest, agrarian version, Mao. Those both failed. True believer, the revolution will come somehow, right? That failed. Then they say change the epistemologic, change the ethical standard from wealth is good to wealth is bad, from need to equality, right? You get the left environmentalism and multicultural socialism race, right? And in epistemology, you go lower one sites, add Frankfurt School repression, and you get postmodernism and terrorism. So what he's saying is, well, the terrorism thing failed. The word environmentalism, multiculturalism, and use words as a weapon, right? Which is
that's where we're at.
Right. This is all, we don't know if that's failed yet. Now, he did this back in the late 90s. Where's the other one? And then there's this one. There's, I don't want to go over this because it's too messy. Here's another example of the theory methods package. And so my point was that I want to take this and update it. And so I sent a tweet to Hicks and to McDonald and to Lindsay's. And of course, Hicks responded because I've been communicating him, a couple times a year for a long time. And so I'm just trying to modernize this. But what I'm trying to do differently is from these guys is I'm trying to, where is the share? I'm trying to show the evolution of this from the female means of warfare all the way up to the present, which is undermining. So I started out with 5 generations, I think, and this one goes to 7. And now I'm going to, here it is. Here's the 4 generations. And I went to 5. And then I went to 7. And so now I'm working on, where did you go? Hello. Somewhere over the rainbow. PowerPoint, Chrome, Excel. And now I'm trying to do the whole thing. So I'm trying to do what I did to the grammars to this method of coercion, warfare.
Right.
You do the same thing. People have done the same thing for philosophy.
Okay.
The problem is we didn't realize, and I didn't, that sophistry to philosophy, occultism to theology, and magic to pseudoscience, and astrology, numerology to mathiness. I didn't realize that those are male methods of lying. So I didn't. It didn't occur. Well, because I'm always doing this. If it exists in the one gender's form, one sex's form,
right?
How does the other sex will do it by the opposite method, either empathizing or sympathizing. So then when you look at it, then you end up with our diamond, right? And it's just freaking disturbing. That's a new word. Just freaking disturbing.
Yes, it is.
Stephen used to say something. Oh, a fucktastrophe. It's a fucktastrophe.
Yeah.
All right. So what am I trying to do? I'm trying to stop sharing. So you were talking about something about Marcuse.
Marcuse, right? So
he was talking about why is this brain or this Star Trek brain reversal gone? Is you've got me out of going there and you keep going there. So what is this role reversal? From this role reversal, you brought up Marcuse. And so what do you want to get to with Marcuse?
It goes that the Nazis were successful in driving the Frankfurt School out.
Correct.
And it was Rockefeller invited them over and paid for their passage and set them up at Columbia.
And Carnegie helped everything.
Yeah.
Anything that Rockefeller didn't help, Carnegie did.
It's a bad team. Those institutions, those great foundations have.
Well, look what happened to Ford. The one that kills me is Ford Foundation. Ford was one of us folk, right? And he put his money in a fund, and this is like, I'm like, you can't, because that kind of money and that kind of do-gooding attacks exactly the wrong people. So I like this example of the foundations. It's like, what did his name say, Daniel? He said Foolus and always swims left.
Breaks left, right?
Breaks left, right? And so, you can't put a pool of unearned money anywhere, because it attracts the worst kind of people who have the most self-congratulatory concepts of doing good, right? And so
and their ethics are questionable too. And it's like there's a we will point to the Anthony Sutton. He was really a brilliant guy, and he was getting a PhD in economics in UCLA. They threw him out because he was coming to the wrong conclusions, because he studied how the Western money built the Soviet Union and supported them throughout their lifespan. And he came to the wrong conclusion, so they threw him out. He ended up at the Heritage Foundation, and he was thrown out of the Heritage Foundation because he told Republican donors what they did not want to hear, which was it was a Ford plant that manufactured the truck that was blown up on the Ho Chi Minh Highway. And so they threw him out, and he was he's scrounging around as an author in the conspiracy realm, but he documented exactly what was going on with the great financial empires. And one of the books that he wrote was about the Skull and Bone Society. And it's a detailed analysis of the Skull and Bones guys.
Okay,
and they're
so
like this.
can I just
Wait, I'm not done yet.
I know, but I want to defend myself when you're done.
What do you need to defend yourself for? Goodness gracious. So
because I don't, this is the kind of stuff I want to keep the right away from.
Okay. But it's like this. It's like the issue is this: is the Skull and Bones boys specifically targeted those institutions to gain control of.
Right. The problem I have with this line of all these authors is it goes from common interest to common conspiracy, and so this is what I'm trying to.
Wait. So do you distinguish between, that's interesting, common interest to common conspiracy? What does that mean?
People just seize opportunities that are in front of them.
Yes.
And they don't always have they usually have just a simple self-interest.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I agree with that premise.
And so the problem with these authors is they try to, instead of saying, we human beings tend to be kind of stupid, which is the right way to look at
starting point, right?
Right. And that, it's like I always use the extreme example of even axe murderers think they're doing good. Serial killers think they're doing good.
Sounds like the beginning of a bad book.
Well, I mean, that's the point, though, is that we can rationalize fucking anything. And so certain subcultures, as I'm watching India right now, right? I mean, India is putting out some of the best news on the planet right now.
Okay.
Which is very interesting, right? And I have a particular Indian news channel and caster that I watch because so and it's most interesting because they are a young enough country that they're just trying things. They're only 75 years old.
Right.
And they're incredibly successful. But the shit they whine about is freaking hysterical. Right? The things they blame other people for, I'm like, it's like us blaming, right? I'm like, who's to blame here? Letting a hostile elite to undermine our institutions because we don't want to be bad mannered, right? Because the Indians like blame Europeans for everything, and I'm like, dude, First of all, you've been walked on by everybody who's come in the neighborhood. So why have you been walked on by others come in the neighborhood? And then you call yourself a civilization, but you're like the Amerindians who complain about the Americans conquering when the last generation of Amerindians exterminated the previous generation of Amerindians. Well, who do you think exterminated the Hrappans and exterminated the prior culture of the Dravidians? You fucking did. So none of us are free of sin. So given that we're all bearing the mark of sin, let's just look at it otherwise and say, okay, well, now we know better. Don't do that again, right? But this whole thing of we was kings is bullshit. No matter who's saying it. It doesn't matter. We pick on the Africans. I'm like, Jesus, they're on the edge of the fucking universe in a highly disease-oriented thing with no decent rivers, right? In a vast continent. Africa might as well be in the fucking moon, right? That's how hard it is to to do anything. Well, great. So, it's not because, and then they complain about colonizations. Sorry, dude, everybody who was colonized is better off than everybody who wasn't. India's like where we were. No, you weren't better. You had society. The society was a bunch of aristocratic sellouts like everybody else on the fucking planet. What you got going for you is you got a great upper class and a great religion and a continent that's basically a peninsula that's relatively hard to get to. And because there's so many of you, nobody can really conquer you.
Right.
So just, put your fucking big boy pants on and go on. I'm on the same thing with America, with Europeans. We let an enemy in here because we felt guilty. And so put our big boy pants on and fix the problem.
But I don't think it's because we felt guilty. I think that the elites sought a commercial advantage in Western civilization. And it specifically, I point at the Victorian English took advantage and for imperial purposes.
Okay, so when did the British emancipate the elites of the enemy? 1830s. When did English civilization divorce from Germanic civilization? 1830s.
1830s?
Yeah. So the problem is the British are moral before then, and they become immoral after. So who converted a moral trade empire to an immoral commercial empire? Right? And what happened in America? Who converted a moral empire, was very practical, to an immoral, what they call capitalist? Europeans don't do capitalism. We do rule of law. Rule of law fosters commerce. But what's capitalism? It's evasion of the paying the cost of externalities. Right? That's what it is. Who's the only people that can afford to do that? Globalists. Right? You have to have globalist or imperialist ambitions to avoid externalities.
So I think you should incorporate this capitalism on your chart, because it's like Quigley would talk about monopoly capitalism, because in Quigley's terms we talk about finance, or he calls it finance capitalism, or no, corporate capitalism. 1730, he described as the beginning of that.
Mm-hmm.
And then it turns into monopoly capitalism, he says, in 1920. And I'm like, no, it really was earlier than that. I point to that 1885 number when the British allowed Rothschild into the nobility as the mark. But it's in that time frame that
Or when what's his
but
name?
it's capitalism.
Minister.
It's what you're calling capitalism, or what the opponents of Western civilization are calling capitalism, is a tool that was created by them for the purpose of or as an agitprop.
Yes. It's the same argument they make in libertarianism or Austrian economics. There's two branches of Austrian economics. There's the Christian and the Jewish. When Austrian economics was first coming out, they called it Jewish economics for a reason. Is because Hayek and Menger are just rule of law, and Rothbard and Mises and Rothbard are not. Their whole game is to justify financialism, right? When irresponsibility for commons. But the Europeans, our thing is the commons. So what does capitalism do? It's a war against commons. What is everything that the left does? It's a war against the commons that we call the institutions of cultural production. It's just war. Now, women undermine men at every opportunity. And you'll know this if you walk into a group of women at any point. They will always and everywhere undermine the man. If there are a bunch of men doing anything, I have this example of this. I just randomly, because I'm gregarious, right? So I'm start shit no matter where I am. So I walk in. So I was in a restaurant the other day, and I do this all the time. I walk up to two women that are just a bit younger than I am, and I said, so whenever I see two women talking this enthusiastically, I wonder where the man is that's getting in trouble.
Right.
And 80% of the time, that's what's going on. And about 20% of the time, actually, we're both really happily married and whatever, and I have a great husband and I love my husband. But 80% of the time, they're actually complaining about men. And so I've also had it backfire on me where I approached a couple. I'll do the same thing to couples. So how many kids are you guys going to have? Right. And it turned out that they were cheating.
Oh my.
I got that signal real fast. But anyway, so the problem is that, I've noticed it in my businesses that the women will always try to undermine the men. They don't try to outcompete the men. Try to undermine them. And then they try to act for special pleading, which is, I had this there's a couple of them, and they say it's male, whatever. It's no, it's just that whenever I try to make a hard decision, you go the wrong way. In other words, you take the wrong choice. Whenever I ask a hard question, you choose the wrong answer, right? And whenever I propose a cost, you evade loyalty. So I mean, your value is in that as an individual.
Negative indicator.
Well, I mean, it's just as a person who's in revenue production,
Right.
she's fantastic. As a person on a management team, she's not. Because like I can have you sit in and listen to the stuff, but I can't listen to anything you say. And if I bring you in and it colors my thoughts, just worried about how you're going to go the wrong direction, then it's too harmful to my management. And so that's what women do, is that they tend to drag down discourse. I don't mean like when you're talking about nonsense, like Well, I mean, when you're talking about, so, and I don't mean that like, I mean, I love female project managers. Right, it's just a very good job for them, right? I hire lots of women. I like them better than men unless a lot of money is involved. Right? Um, it's just a better job for, in my business, to use women to run projects, right? Um, but you can't, but and so those women become very good over time because they get used to making hard decisions and delivering. So those people are good. But it's like that's because they're forced into making hard decisions over money, right? And so, the thing is that you can't get out of this problem that people that the sex differences in cognition. I don't mean, and again, prevaricate here. We're all an admixture, right? There's some men who think as women and some women who think as men. You get those women who are still feminine, but they are able to think rationally because you've put them through the financial meat grinder enough that they have to be responsible, right, for the profit and loss.
There's no avoiding it,
There's
right?
no avoiding it. It's like having children. There's no avoiding it. My view is that, well, women just need the same exposure to responsibility that men do in order to become responsible. And men, on the other hand, like, I can't be responsible for that. They'll avoid the responsibility. It's not that they don't want, but that's different from saying they don't want to be responsible. They don't want to avoid the responsibility for others,
That's right.
right? And so you see that among men. But you see in women, they don't want to be responsible for others. They don't want to be responsible themselves, right? They want to have the least responsibility possible. And you see that. I don't know. I'm getting off on a rant here. We started out with I was questioning why I don't really understand the whole. I mean, the Nazis are no. I mean, I can go back in history, and there's a whole lot of people like that, and that doesn't mean anything to me, right? I mean, and I look at those people the same way. Well, were they trying to solve a particular problem? I mean, it's great to pick on the Achaemenids or something, but I mean, they lived in a pretty awful time and place, right? I mean, so whatever. It's kind of, it's one thing to go to the Chinese and say, that they were pretty they don't really care for human life too much, but they're trying to use a fairly small elite to manage a vast population and territory that they're continually colonizing,
Right.
because, right? And so, okay, well, and I can sort of rationalize that, and I'll look at the Germans the same way. I don't get it. The ones that bother me are the ones that kill their own freaking people. I mean, it's one thing to fight an enemy. It's another to think you're a fucking genius and kill your own people.
Rough, man. It's just
Anyway, so what are we doing here?
we're going to talk about lying, I think.
Okay. All right. So I spent an hour going on too many sidetracks.
Oh, it's so close. It's warm. You're all warmed up.
I am warmed up. Thank you. Well, I have to find. I'm going to minimize that. That out of the way. I'm going to minimize that. Get that out of the way. I'm going to close that and that and that. I'm going to go back here. And I'm going to go back. In I wish I could. The problem now, I got to get you back up because you were all over it at the end of our last.
What's that?
You said go back to the stem. Let's go back to the stem. I'm almost there.
Right.
So I was making the point earlier that when I was working on this table of the history of evolution, the convergence
Yes.
of Christian and Jewish thought, I thought that convergence was really useful because it shows in how our diamond converges at the bottom.
Ah,
Right. And it helps explain this. So it also helps explain why the left wins that argument, because it's more desirable. It's more responsibility evading.
right.
So
Behaviorally economical.
yes. So um so there's a convergence happening. And like you said, what we see in this diamond and we see in real life is the what I call Abrahamism, whatever, is the synthesis of female undermining and male systematizing.
Yes.
Right. So it's a via negativa, whereas natural law is a via positiva. So natural law is reciprocity, truth, right? The rest includes truth, and which is productivity, right? Fully informed, productive, fully informed, warranted, voluntary exchange, free of imposition of cost upon the demonstrated interests of others and within the limits of restitutability and liability. So that's the optimum order. If you do that, then you will automatically form all market organizations, the association, cooperation, the family, production, production, commons, polities, and war. So those all things form as market consequences of doing them. Of those markets, you'll develop institutions that favor those markets. In order for polities and polities, you'll form the state. For commons, you'll form a government. For production, we'll form economies, corporations, organizations, and businesses. For families, we'll form the institution of marriage and the family. Right? For cooperation, we'll develop norms, traditions, and values. And for association, you will find manners, basically we call manners. Right? So you develop all these institutions across the spectrum. Moreover, since you form those institutions, at least three of them, those that favor cooperation, right, the law will evolve, and you will form the state, right, and the government, which is authority, and you will form the faith or the church and the family or the religion, whatever. The religion might vary. It might be Chinese religion, which is more closer to or European philosophy. It might form a mythology like the Indians. It might charge a authoritarian monotheistic tradition like the Middle East. And it might stay down there in magic with the Africans. It was disturbing to me is how magic is the least bad of them culturally, and is the worst of them epistemically. And whereas philosophy, whether European or Chinese or Buddhist, is the best epistemically for your people. In other words, your people almost progress. And authoritarian religion is the worst, because it's stagnating. So it's just interesting to me that magic is like the least harmful, which I think is really fascinating. I don't know why it's just but in any event, so what you see is that that we form if we have natural law, we form markets form institutions form trifunctionalism, right? Law,
Right.
faith, state, male, female, neutral, right? We find, right, that this forms it. But if you don't form natural law, you don't form markets, or you insufficiently form markets, and then you have authority and state, religion state, and you don't end up with law, you end up with command. And so
Beta, beta world.
you're a beta world. So and then if you and because everything you fail to do and in imposing rule of law creates the incentive for what you call the betas, which are the unproductive parasites that organize by word and false promise and whatever to do it.
Right, and it's like it's the weaponization of the underclass is all it is. So you
Yes.
mobilize the underclass as a human weapon to overwhelm the alpha types. That's beta.
Right, because you know I said this was so that's exactly, and so it's like people think the government is powerful, but it's actually an illusion. There's very few people there, right? And very few people are able to project power. So what the government is able to do is it creates you incrementally create enough order that you can incrementally suppress violations of order, until what happens is you have enough, even a small number of people can step. It's like whacking the gopher,
Whack-a-mole.
Whack-a-mole, right?
Yep.
So they can whack enough heads as they pop up in criminality or what, that the small number of people can achieve that. But if you ever got it, you get enough people that they can't, that overcomes the number of moles they can whack, which isn't very hard really, then all of a sudden they win. You win because the government can't do that. So I always say government legitimacy is different from government competency, capability, not competency, capability. So the capability of the government is quite small to suppress all these things.
Yeah.
Right. And so what they count on is that the amount of variation is relatively small. All right. But so the government's power, each of us, because we only think of ourselves as an individual or a small group trying to get away with something. Well, I mean, it's actually the people that are really good at constraining us and calling in the government to come suppress it. So, but the problem is it's actually a small number of people and a small amount of suppression that they're capable of. So what does the Russians do? They went the opposite way. Most of their military budgets actually for internal policing, internal military. Just like the Chinese, same thing.
It's like we can't trust our people too good, so we gotta be ready.
Right, and so what happens, of course, is that this isn't a via negativa like it is in the West.
Right.
Which is we just say, okay, well, do whatever is just within these limits. They're totalitarian, so they say what you can do too. The French are in the middle, and so are the Russians, which they say, here's what you can't do and here's what you must do. What we're objecting to in America a lot is there's an increasing deviation from the via negativa. Now, if you want me to jump back into role reversal, I'll say that the positive law movement is Jewish, just like, right, and so they're, I mean, Rez, Kelson, Dworkin, they're Jewish, right? They're all Jews. Where Bentham Bentham was the guy who thought like I did. I do. He was trying to, he wanted to formalize law into a science.
Okay.
He failed, but he failed because he tried to come up with a positive law. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Right. And so the Napoleonic Code is a positive law.
Yeah.
Why do they have Napoleonic Code as a positive law? They have it because the French couldn't trust the fucking judges to be not corrupt. Well, that was the wrong way to handle the goddamn problem. The right way to handle the problem is through review, adversarialism, which is you don't need that many judges to police the judges.
Right.
You put out the via negativa law, and you're right, and you put out basically legislation. Those are two different things. Legislation can expire. Law is permanent, or not permanent. Common law is empirical, revisionary. So,
Right.
so they put this continental law, which is why England can't, or the UK can't be part of Europe, really, is because the French and Jewish law are authoritarian, and Germanic law is not. What we don't look at correctly is that West and North Slavic law tends to be more hands off. In other words, there was more left to the church and family, because what happens is the church and family are sufficient until until commercial industrialization, right? So you go this way. That's the Russia's problem too. The church and family are right, and authoritarianism is necessary. And China and Russia have the same fucking problem. Did it again. The same problem, which is that the barbarians are still in the middle.
Yeah.
And so we still have, yet the barbarians are beginning to civilize the Kazakhs and well, they're basically like, I don't know how to describe this. Turks are Mongolians, right? The Turkic people are not, right? The Turkic people are a North Mongolian people. I'm going to get this wrong. The people from that area that have come over and mingled with the Iranic people and the Caucasian people in the center, right? In the steppes. And so this has become Turkmenistan and all the stands, right? And unfortunately, they got Islam. So you have China and Russia. You have Islam.
What is funny is these guys in the mountains there in the middle, right? They were the same guys that were causing the Euphrates Valley issues. It's like they just barbarians come out with the bronze implements and start raising hell. It's like those guys have been in trouble a long time. Just wild men of the mountains.
And we have a problem looking at it like that. I mean, if you look at a broad enough scope, you see Europeans and the East Asians, who are the people with the good land.
Yeah, yeah.
All right. And you have the Mesopotamians
with the good land.
With the good land. And you have the Arabs, and you have Africans with, the green part of Africa with okay land, but they're sort of isolated.
Yeah.
And you have the Indians with the good land, but they're sort of isolated. So all of us are fighting the same goddamn problem for 5,000 fucking or 10,000 years or more, which is these people in that part of the world are. They are. Why? Because we look at those steppe and we're like, well, the people can live on it. Yeah, but I mean, they can't create capital.
You can't do it because someone's going to come take it.
Well, not only that is it's just not good enough land. I mean, it's
not isolated.
Okay, so you have, like we said, they have all the negative factors. Lack of rivers, flat terrain, no borders, which
mountains. It's just rough terrain. Right? It's like, so you're like isolated, living in the hollows and get mean, and you see all the good stuff going on in the valley, and you're like, oh, let's go.
I mean, what's the difference between Afghanistan and the moon? There isn't any.
It's like this. The Afghani tin was useful.
Well, yeah. I mean, and then there were trade routes through there, right?
That's right.
So I mean if we look at it as the bomb of civilization went off in Mesopotamia, right?
Right.
Went off early, right? Boom. Agrarianism starts in Anatolia. It's upper Mesopotamia, which is today's Anatolia. Because really, I mean, that swampy stuff up there must have been a really good place to live. 10,000 years ago.
Right.
And then you got the swampy stuff at the top near the Black Sea, Caspian, whatever, right? And then you got the rivers, and then you got the Persian Gulf, and that's a pretty good system right there. So things blow up from there. So, every piece of land away from there can be defended, but up there it can't be. And there's not, and there's enough to survive on there, but there's not enough to build capital, right? There's just no, and so
You have to be tough.
you have to be
tough and organized, and you
And you have here's
and
important.
wait, you're in communication with those guys that are civilized down there. The civilized guys are talking to you because it's like they want to know you and know what's going on. And
Right. And the thing is, though, that I think about it, it's like the Mongols. If you can develop a polity that survives on little, they can defeat a polity that survives on a lot. Does that make sense? All right. And so that's a core problem in history, is we always say that the barbarians replace the domesticated people, but it's actually a system too. The advanced cultures develop a system that's increasingly prosperous, but it's also increasingly dependent on stable relations, right? And the people in them need a lot of stuff in order to support the hierarchy. But if you create a relatively flat, wide hierarchy of warriors who basically need 6 horses and
a couple of bows,
and they can a couple of bows, and they live by stealing everything that isn't nailed down. I mean, it's just a really efficient algorithm for running in the world. Anyway, how the hell are we off on this topic again?
so wait, we're going to go to this. No, we're good. We're talking about lying.
Okay, so I was going.
You said common law is provisional and empirical.
Common law is just tort property. That's all it is. And we evolve tort over time by evolving analysis of discovery of demonstrated interests, where those demonstrated interests were obtained by not imposing upon the demonstrated interests of others. We call this, in libertarianism, we call it first use. In other words, we call it discovery, or we call it homesteading.
Yeah.
And I like the term homesteading because it is the most explicatory term. Explicatory. Which is that you have to actually increase the capital value of a thing in order to claim it's a demonstrated interest.
Right.
You can have an interest. In other words, you can be interested in without having obtained an interest. Right. Demonstrating an interest.
Without demonstrating actual interest, right?
And this is the usual. And so if you try to claim an interest after someone else has already claimed an interest, that's an imposition of cost. Even if you bore a cost to obtain it, right? You've borne that cost against our existing demonstrated interests of others, so you should have fucking known better. So in libertarianism, libertarians have got this down, the ethics down. All right, so it's just common law is just tort, which is demonstrated interest, right? And demonstrated interest is the only means of decidability available.
Right.
Right. So what you have is you can have a method of choice, but you can't have a method of decidability. So, for example, in history, a family will own the land, not the
right.
And the reason for that is that, and it's the same like marriage, is that we don't want excess people thrown out as a burden on society, right? So you would be selfish if you sold the farm, took the money, and then left your family out in the cold.
Right.
So that would be a crime because your farm was actually a corporation. You might be the CEO of the corporation, but your family is shareholders. And so, and the locality, the community, is a shareholder in insurance against imposition of costs by your failure. In other words, they don't want you to externalize costs of your profit taking by putting the burden, the moral hazard of your family members out on the street where the people of the community are subject to hazard. Well, same thing with marriage. Marriage evolves to prevent hazards. First of all, to prevent men from killing each other.
Externalization of costs, right?
And so when we say marriage, we mean have children.
Yes.
And having children, marriage, the purpose of marriage is to say that people won't interfere in the relationship, the corporation that you've created as a family out of self-defense. Although I don't want the people. So in this sense, interfering in a marriage is a crime against the community as well as the family. So that's the common law, right? Now, excuse me, that's the origin of the common law in Europe, right? Is the origin of most law in the world, really. It's just how much of it's based on decidability and how much is a choice, right? So decidability is a fact, right? There is a demonstrated interest. Everything above there can be a choice, right? The fact that you
Preference, right?
Right. Well, yeah. Well, technically, a preference is individual. A choice might be collective.
Political, okay.
Right. So, and I'm trying to, excuse me, I'm saying technically what I mean is in order to disambiguate these terms. So, you can impose a cost against all demonstrated interests pretty easily, right? I mean, you can gossip, right? You can undermine, you can interfere. I mean, basically, it's undermining. You can interfere, you can defraud, right? You can misinform, misrepresent, misinform, you can fraud, you can harm, you can kill. I mean, you can do all these things. So, where we left off last week was I'm trying to find it now. Can I switch over to sharing my screen now?
Yes, you may.
You can't tell which one we got here. Outline draft. Yes, that's it. So can you see?
Marxism, postmodernist. I see you scrolling about.
Yeah, I'm trying to get back to the. All right, so let's go down here. Nope, that's the wrong one. Is that the right one? No, that's the wrong one. We're gonna go back up here. And then we're gonna go here. So last week, we created
Right.
we brought in the male versus female behaviors. There's a space here because I'm trying to reorder these. And in doing so, what I discovered is there is too neutral a position to the males. So I'm going to try to I'm going to break this into 3, and I'm going to add male, neutral, and female, neutral, and male, just
Okay.
like we have in the triangle. All right. And because what's happened is I've intermingled the spectrum of male, which is the dominant and the reciprocal, into this.
I see.
Right. So I want to separate that into 3. Actually do that right now. Right.
There you go.
And then we started out with how do we use overloading was to deceive? And I thought this was really, the more I thought about what we're doing here, is the more I thought about what it's got to be possible to measure overloading.
Yes.
It's got to be able to measure it. I'm not sure how we would do it, but there's got to be a way. It's when I said to was dealing with this when I was talking about who's the author of the Black Swan, Taleb,
Yeah.
and I was like, he's trying to use math, and you can't do it because we have no system of measurement. I said, once we have AIs, we can get that system of measurement because the AI will produce something that's quantitatively analyzable.
Right.
But then I started working on this. I'm like, I bet we could get close to it. I'm not interested in research, but I bet we could get close to a measure of overloading. In other words, what does it take to overload people? And I think that's largely an IQ and knowledge function.
That's right, because it comes down to how fast they can adapt their cognitive function to the load.
Right. And so you would have your neural economy, your natural neural economy, your genetics, and then you would have the intersexual dimensions in your morals, your instincts, and then you would have your general knowledge. Right. And excuse me, you would have your logical skill and your general knowledge, right? So there's 4 properties. We know that general knowledge is the best substitute for IQ. In other words, the more you read, you actually do get smarter. Well, unless you're reading romance novels. And I know you got a lot of those somewhere, Brad, right? You got a lot of,
that's what's going on.
Yeah, that's not happening.
So I was going to comment. Studying the natural law here is it's improved my cognitive functionality by allowing my thoughts to be disambiguous or unambiguous and clear, and my expressions to be clear. Just thank you for the work, and the effort is worth it to the audience. It makes you smarter. And it
improves your demonstrated intelligence.
Yeah, you're able to demonstrate you make better decisions faster.
Yes.
Okay.
You just think about it. What was it like before we had language?
God.
It's pretty hard to think without language. We can tell by giving a name to a thing creates the equivalent of an episodic memory.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And so you can then compare the episodic memory. So we don't. So when we look at these language, the more articulate you can be with your thoughts and feelings, right? The more precise measure you're making, the better measures you can subsequently make, right? So I just find it's just way easier to talk about the world when you have this ability. And I think everybody who learns it says the same thing. So I think it's like science increased demonstrated intelligence. In other words, what we learned about the sciences. And my opinion is that this will improve our thinking as much as did the other sciences, as the empirical revolution.
But I would say this is the interesting function of overloading is it requires that the person being overloaded admit it. That they allow it to overwhelm them. So, like, I would say to argue Western civilization has been overloaded.
Correct.
Because we failed to recognize the nonsensical nature of the load that was imposed upon us. That was
so you can get
detrimental, right?
So I mean, right. So let me see if I can science this a bit. In other words, operationalize it. Yes. So basically, whatever you think about is determined by your thalamus. In other words, whatever is the most excited obtains both your subconscious and conscious attention.
Yeah.
Right. So the trick is to create a relationship between something you want or desire, fear, and an argument that is sufficiently close and that's the best way I can think of it, to overload your ability to disambiguate it and falsify it. In other words, so what they're trying to do is they try to overload you by any technique available: empathizing, systematizing, the big ones, intuition, reason is easy, but empathizing, reasoning, or even calculating. You can overload people's ability to hold attention on what is internally consistent with the world, instead of internally consistent with the verbal expression you're being exposed to. So this is why storytelling works. The interesting thing is we need this vulnerability in order for storytelling to work. In other words, to us to be informed by stories. We need it. So the problem is the fact that we have this, which is called suggestibility, right? We need suggestibility in order to be able to communicate, right? You have to have it. And suggestibility by stories is the most parsimonious means of conveying information. So all words are measurements, and all measurements form suggestions by auto-association. So, I mean, they're always, so the whole trick is, all that's going on is overloading. Right? That's all this deceit is. You're either loading, right, toward you're either disambiguating, I think I'll use that term.
There you go.
You're either disambiguating, which is you're loading, or you're overloading. Loading is for values. You're attributing value to something. And overloading is deceiving. So I may load something in order to tell you how I feel about it.
Right. So you're suggesting that I should feel the same way when you do that.
Correct. So disambiguating, loading, overloading.
Right.
Now, after overloading, we get denial. And after denial, we get undermining. So I'm either disambiguating, which is telling the truth, or as close to truth being truthful. I should say we're being honest, truthful, or testimonial.
Right.
Then we have the ability to loading and framing, which is, I want you to understand how I feel about it, and you should feel about it that way too. Right. Or at least I want you to understand how I feel about it, because how I feel about it will inform you as to the reason of why I did what I did. Then there's overloading, which is an attempt to distract you or deceive you. Then there's denial. And then there's undermining. And so you go from pulling you into my world, right, to meaning, to influencing, right, to coercing, to denial, to undermining. So it turns from negativa, pulling you into me, to aggression, positiva.
Yep.
So we went through this list, right? We went through this list by this same means. We said, here is the universal grammar, which is the underlying it, the deflationary grammars, the testimonial grammars, the ordinary grammars, the influencing, persuading, overloading, evasing, evading,
Yes,
evasion and evading combined in one word, evasing,
right.
evading, to undermining, to harming. Right, so we've covered the spectrum of parameters. And this is that we've tended, and we've said, okay, here's the scale, right? So we've got the neutral scales and the productive scales and the harmful scales. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
So we've got these sort of three, and what I'm having trouble
what's that?
is how do I do this? How do I put these together? I'm sure this is the female, neutral, and male, right? The female and neutral and male end up being in here, right? Because the male is here, right? And the female is on this side of it, and where's loading and framing? Oh, it's really there. It's on this, the undermining, right? And then
I
you
see
get
it, I see it as it is, because you have the positive, which is these are all starting at number 2, overloading. They're in unethical range. So I see them, if I see them organized in a diamond with that.
so this begins unethical.
I think
I
so,
don't
because
know.
well,
I mean, because you could put influencing.
that will be like in the neutral category of the borderline between the upper and lower triangles. Because I'm just telling you stories that are I'm telling you where I'm at, and then it's tending, loading, framing, and obscuring is trending out of the ethical range into the unethical range.
So is can almost do it. Can't do it. Can almost do it.
Then I see them splitting off like this. So there's stuff, the systematization on the right half, and then the empathizing ones to the left half.
Yeah, I think that's, and we can. Well, I mean, what's the difference between undermining and harm? These are
This
these are
equivalent.
physical and these are social.
Right. So it's like they're
Physical, social.
equivalent, ethically equivalent.
So we can just take this and break it into the triangle, which is the top is this, right? The top is this stuff. Deflationary grammars.
Right. And it stops, but there's like a border area where you're going from influencing to overloading is the outside the pale. Because
Yeah.
you're just telling stories. It's just barroom talk, right? You know what I mean? It's persuasion. Okay, we're in polite conversation. We're in even rowdy conversation, but where you're starting to tell lies, you're out of ethics. You're ethically outside the pale.
I think I got these backwards is the problem I'm going to. Should be persuasion and influencing. Yeah, that's the problem. I reversed these two.
Well, it's like that influencing it's interesting because influencing is like a feminine version of persuasion argument.
Yeah, exactly.
So
And
they're
so
not
this,
so much swapped, but equivalent, one to the left and one to the right.
can we do this? Does this work? Yes, it does. Right? So if I do this, yeah, we can just keep doing that, right?
That's right.
Because
Because then you've got you're breaking them off by the systematization versus empathization.
I don't know if this goes here or here.
I think persuasion goes in the middle because it's just persuasion is it's by what means, and
It's not inflationary, right? No, it's not inflationary. It's an ordinary.
pre-inflationary.
Hello, that's what an X means. It's cut. Thank you. And I need to put this up here because there's a whole bunch of them. No, 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 no. No, doesn't work that way. Nope, it's this way. Because it's systematizing. Well, let me ask you a question. Is any of this not systematizing?
I think that the more yeah, it's
Shit, dude, I don't know. If I go down
it
this,
becomes it go ahead. They're systemic.
these are all systemic, right? At least these are. The deflationary grammars are.
So it's like
Do these belong? Do these belong as methods of argument? Yeah, they do. They're
yes.
not argument though, they're methods. These are operations. But what's the difference? This is subtractive. But if I start enumerating these, I'm going to end up with these.
measurements.
I wanna
So it's
leave
like
it-
the issue is when, so in a overloading circumstance, right?
Mhm.
That I'm gonna present spurious arguments that are not consequential, that's going to generate confusion among the systemically overwhelm the capacity of the listener to deal with a variety of arguments. Or does that make sense?
Yeah, I see what to do here, though. I think we got it. We're going the right direction. Where's fictions? Are fictions neutral? I don't know.
So it's like this problem, maybe we're trying to fit it too much.
Well, I'm worried that we're gonna end up with is let's go back to this. I'll find it here. Give me a second. The heck? Where is? Now, see, there's back when I did it in 3 generations. I got this whole history of doing it. Here's the whole. So here's the step. They start with the false promises, right?
Right.
Here's how they scale it. These two are backwards. Here's how the false promises. Here's the attack method. I don't know if there's too much there. The same thing. I can combine those two. So we have this, take this out. This is just a female method, but so delay, deceive, undermine, so discord. And it all comes down to evasion of responsibility. Seduction, distraction, evasion of responsibility.
I think as a matter of editorial comment, is female may not be the right answer. It might be feminine.
Feminine is the right answer. I think I asked you before to make sure I start doing that. Keeping the men at bay. So what am I
Oh,
trying?
that's interesting right there. Go up a little bit. Is this this is, what are these? These are just types of behaviors,
Right.
or
So
is it there's an escalation of scale there?
it's a scale issue. It's a scale. See, globalism. Right. These are their goals of othering, separating, supremacy, nepotism, polylogicalism, physicalism, parasitism, right? That's great, but you got to get up to hazarding, then undermining, then sedition, then insurrection, then rebellion, revolution. I mean, if you want to know, that's how it's done. Right. And they do it by that method. And this is the strategy. And then uh, this is their history. And this is the summary of how the techniques are used together. And this is the false promise they operate under, the seduction. And this is the means by which they attack them. And all we've done over here in this is talk about the grammars used to conduct it.
Okay.
All right. So I mean, it's the information's all here from the beginning, and I guess what I'm missing here is just the I should start with seduction and irresponsibility. Social construction. All right, so here's
Right.
undermining by it. Yeah, I'd go way up here. Let me go where I can go. Special pleading, plausible deniability, warfare from within by treason, sedition, war against informational, social, political, economic institution, by evasion, blah, 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 to undermine, rather than offer competing alternatives using critique, social construction, pill pull, fictionalisms, baiting into hazard, revisionism and obscurantism, false promise, financial warfare, legal contrivance, exploiting our tolerance, basically our true functionalism, for profit from war from within, violating our self-determination by self-determined means, etc. And the other do not. So they start out with I go to baiting into hazard. I don't so with this thing, I don't start with the female, right? If I start with a female, then I could scale it up.
That's right. So it's because it goes from an individual into civilizational to global.
Right. And so I want to start with the female or the feminine. Thank you.
Thank you.
And so I start with, and so but what happens? I start with, I don't start with, where's storytelling?
Yeah.
Right. So here's, okay. There should be more storytelling.
So there's a, yeah.
So I have the part where I talk about women and it says, no, we covered this really well in the slides, which is the problem a mother faces.
Right.
Right. And so that's the issue, is that mothers have an instinct, a need to extend their nervous system over that of children to provide continuous education and the production of self-regulation.
Right.
Right. What we really mean is emotional compensation. That emotional compensation, self-regulation, basically makes the child addicted to the mother. And so, just like sex makes the adult male addicted to the mother. So, or the woman, excuse me, the mother of his children. The sex is an addiction. I mean, heroin is just the same drug we get during sex, right? I mean, and so, okay. So I need to start with the female under there, but I'm trying to get from this narrative to this diagram to tie it into these diagrams. And I'm wondering, does neutrality exist other than there? Aren't these systematizing? Well, they sure look like it to
Yes.
me.
They look systemic.
Does systematizing have to be in a hierarchy, or can it just be male, the male version? Because what's the female version of measurements? There we go. I got there.
It's empathic measurements.
Thank you.
There you go.
And our measurement is true or false.
So inclusion, exclusion, right? That's the female version, is inclusion, exclusion. It's the same.
Inclusion, exclusion. Yeah, so they do with approval, disapproval, and inclusion, exclusion. No, this is rejection, right?
Yep.
Okay, that's what I was looking for. And so they're emotionally consistent
Mm-hmm.
and they're externally consistent. That's what I was missing. See, Brad, we do good work.
I like to watch you work.
I don't know.
I don't know how
Why
much
is
I'm
it-
contributing. I just
You know, yeah, I know you think that, and I know the audience thinks that, but it's it's talking shit through.
That's right.
I mean, and the difference is when it's very hard to get distracted when I'm talking to you compared to when I'm working by myself.
Right.
And it's like the same thing. If you want to test your ideas, write them. That's first,
That's
which
right.
will get you halfway there. And then try to persuade someone. It's amazing how often when you try to persuade something, you realize how stupid you sound.
So change it to masculine measurements. That's to work on that process.
Yes, let's just keep trying. So this is internal.
That's operational. Right?
Yeah. Now, the thing is, I know that this is the same over here. This is,
Socially.
yeah,
There's
I just
like-
don't know if it's so, yeah. Social.
There's like it's like this functional thing. It's like there's a there's a internally consistent emotionality that is not socially consistent.
Okay, I was thinking, so I didn't hear that.
So there's a emotionally consistent function that is not socially consistent.
So there's internally, empathically, and socially.
Yeah. Which is that that logical, the feminine is not.
Yes, because
It
these
can
things
be
go
it can be inconsistent, right?
Say that again, I didn't get it.
It's the empathic function can be inconsistent.
Yeah, but that thing is, it can, that's what they're seeking. No, this is here.
Yeah.
This is observable.
Yeah.
Well, that right there was worth the, it's so funny because the feminists were bitching about, have been bitching about this since the 60s.
What's that?
Well, it's that truth is a male construct, just like whiteness. I mean, the complaint the feminists made about truth and whatever being and reason being male constructs, and the complaint that whiteness against whiteness, the same thing. Because
Yes,
white is just science. Testimony.
right.
Reality.
Correspondence to reality, right? Precision. Truth, justice, and the American way, right?
Jesus, Brad, just that?
Yeah. It is like weightlifting, isn't it?
What?
Getting this work done. Moving ions around in.
I'm trying to figure out if women do this. There's a responsibility to this,
Yes.
and there's an irresponsibility to this.
They there's some kind of expressions. So there's a type of expression. It's a feminine expression. I don't know what it is. It's like we were talking about this yesterday, the issue of they're making noises. It's just the way they're asking. They're just asking for you to give them something, right?
Right.
So you like we talked about you talked about it in that other document was special pleadings, right?
Yep.
Just bleatings, you know what I mean? Just noises that are seeking to gain something, just asking. So I think
That's brilliant. Where do I put that? Is that there or is that here?
What's that?
That's such a profoundly good piece of disambiguation that they're never testifying, they're only asking. I think this might be it.
Asking in quotes, I think, because it's like it's any kind of special pleading, right? Which doesn't have to even be verbal. It can be, it's just, that's,
See, they think this is good manners.
and
But
it's like this is
it's really
eventually
just
going to give.
responsibility evasion.
What's that?
It's just responsibility evasion. Responsibility. This is the opposite. I hate this is again. This is the shit I hate. I just went through a whole bunch of conversations with the women in my life.
Yeah.
I can't disambiguate whether it's because of my position. In other words, whether
I'm lost.
well, if I go through it, I'm listening here and I'm like, well, God damn it, they're always. How often do they tell you the truth? Fucking never.
That is like what.
It's literally never.
The question is this: is there like so? Okay, we're gonna go back. We're gonna do a little thought experiment because it's like child that can't speak any. They just make noises. Okay, they just make noises to get what they need, and then they figure out they can make noises to get what they want. Right? And it's just to match the noises to make it so that it causes you to deliver the thing they want. Right?
So in order to the steel man, the falsification of that is, so what do men do? What's the inverse of men?
The men perform duties to deliver what is expected. And they promise what is to be delivered,
Okay,
so that the expectations are lined up properly, and so that they can meet their duties.
So if I meet a guy in the street, there's the implied threat always whenever men come together.
This could get dangerous.
And so how do men and women are aware of the implied threat? They just feel more vulnerable than men do.
Right.
Men come together, feel the implied threat. I ask you for your opinion or honesty. Your opinion or the honesty or the truth. Opinion, honesty, and truth. That's the escalation. Opinion, honesty, truth.
Okay. Right, because if you're depending on how you ask is what you're going to get, right?
Right, and
it's like also, when you really ask me for the truth, it's like, you sure you want to hear the truth?
Well, I mean, this is liability, right? I mean, my opinion. I'm not liable for much in my opinion.
No. Okay.
I'm liable. I'm liable. I'm
So
liable for.
so your liability decreases to opinion from the truth. So you got the arrows pointed the wrong way.
No, your liability increases with opinion from opinion to honesty and truth.
And now, but it looks to me like the math looks like the okay. Yeah, okay, that's fine.
So it's responsibility, and you brought up duty.
Right.
There's something different here. Disagreeing? Asking versus agreeing? What's the relationship? So I walk to a guy in the street and I ask him for his opinion. He might just say, I don't give a shit, right?
Right.
If he's more honest, he'll say, and he's going to invest in it, he'll say, avoid is different from evade. Avoid, opine, honesty, truth. So I go out and I ask him, and I said, what's your opinion on this? Great. What's your honest opinion on this? This is going to be normative, right? This is a normative thing.
Yeah.
He's saying this with, and what's the truth, which is includes the balance scale of both positive and negatives. Now, this is basically a cost of responsibility, duty, and liability, right?
Yep.
So you're seeking agreement, which is right, or disagreement, disagreement. And they're seeking approved. Was it
Yeah.
approval, disapproval?
No.
It's not right.
They're offering approval or disapproval for what they're asking. Or they seek to get something as a measure of your approval. Right, so they're seeking external validation. So external validation. So validation.
Too many things. You gotta disambiguate it like this.
Okay.
This I know. This. I'm trying to get to, we're trying to fill in. Do you get, if you ask a woman's opinion, can you get it?
No, I don't think so. I think that
I like,
get what she thinks you want to is going to suit her, how she feels about it at the moment, how she feels it will work at the moment on the social level and interpersonal level.
yeah, I think that's what I'm asking. I'm asking.
There's the math that goes on in that head is way more complex than it looks like, and what comes out is not what you would call the truth.
No, I think you just hit on it, which is, if I ask these questions of a man, it's not going to vary. Whereas if I ask these questions of a woman, it's going to vary. Is that true?
I think that I would say that you know, in the extreme case, it's going to vary a lot.
Well, I think, she's going to say me, a family member, a friend, the people who would be aware of me.
That's
or
right.
Or general political.
Right.
I think that opinion is contingent
On the social circumstances.
on the social circumstance, where I don't think.
But you got to look at it like this. You go to a more extreme situation to understand a man will vary in some fashion as well. Okay. If you want to, the masculine response will also vary. The male response will vary based on the extremity of the social circumstance as well. So social, it's like, which is social, the security of this environment, right?
So
Which
it's
is
the same thing.
it's like you're gonna, when you're in a diverse environment, a male in a diverse environment. So it's like this: you're away from your ethnic group. You're in
Keep going.
you're in a, like, you're in a other environment. You're in a like alien environment, right? If I'm in the inner city and I'm surrounded by a bunch of strange guys that are, you know, big dudes that are not like my social
So
class.
they're just more sensitive to social circumstance.
Yes, and it's like way more sensitive. Because it's like they're sensitive inside our ethnic group where we are not. You know what I mean?
Okay, that's one dimension.
So the beta males are more sensitive. They act more like, in a feminine, and they're, it's like to the women, everybody's in the other group, like out grouped. They don't in-group people, like they in-group their family, like we in-group our nation.
Right. This is fucking okay. I got to get back to the quick question I'm asking. In the spectrum of opinion,
Yeah.
honesty to testimony, fundamental difference between men and women is the male and female cognition is a sensitivity to, degree of sensitivity to, um, approval and devotion versus truth and loyalty.
Yes.
This is again a question of scale,
It's just scale.
right? Basically, it's just fucking scale. We end up with this all the time. It's just scale. Right, I mean, that's the. So up here, is that a measurement? The more you work on this, the more fucking interesting, excuse me, I did it again. The more we work on this, the more interesting it is. Say, but Kurt, we're trying to get the book done.
Yes, sir. We're trying to get the book done.
So this. It's just everything's the different.
The interesting function of it goes like this. So if you go, I want to go to this beta state function, because it goes like this.
Yep, go ahead.
There's a reason for it, because it's like, why do they want to look? They're trying to make everybody feel like feminine cognition. You want all the men to be empathically oriented and not true oriented.
Well, I see. So what we've got here is I need another.
Because it's cheaper to empathically charge people than it is to cause them to respond to real self-interest. That's why the alpha state, is the truth and correspondence. The beta state is fiction, momentary convenience. So that you change the truth by changing the story, just like Orwell changed the language to cause them to do the thing you want them to do and normalize.
This is a productive synthesis, a trade synthesis, and this is a compromise synthesis. And what happens is this turns into bribery. This turns into fraud. Right? That's what they do. They engage in fraud. Right? You should
There's occult control is in there somewhere too.
What?
See, there's bribery, there's fraud, and there's what's the right word for it? So I don't talk about fraud. I talk about how do I there's a word for it that begins with a B too, but it's blackmail.
Well, I mean, we go through the whole thing. The point I want to try to make is that true?
What do you mean by compromise?
Synthesis? I don't know. I mean,
the beta synthesis is the betas do what they don't care about anything besides what is momentarily advantageous. To keep Babylon together.
The thing that, but we see, we find this everywhere, is that the basic problem with this problem is it doesn't scale. In order to scale, you need the betas.
Yes.
Right? So that's the issue. And why do the betas allow scale? Because they systematize.
Right. They generate the matrix of storytelling, and all this acts as the glue that holds Babylon together. Because you have diverse people that have divergent interests, and you have to tell them enough of a story that causes them to allow the tax to be harvested.
Why am I not getting?
Yeah.
See, this is the issue, is this is constant, but it's small scale. This is required for this, and it's required right? You got this problem. And so to get scale, you either have to produce this or this. Because
And then
this
why
doesn't
did you,
scale.
now why did you put the bribery and material and financial fraud on top?
Well, I mean, that's where it goes south, right? So the this is escalating bads, and this is escalating bads. I can go force this way and seduction that way. But the synthesis is here. So the problem is that we get, whenever you combine this with this, we get bads. Whenever you combine this with this, we get goods.
Well, why are bribery and material and financial fraud up there still? Like, I don't understand.
I don't know why it's hard. It's this. Think of this as failure points. Failure point to cooperate, cooperate, cooperate. Failure point, failure point, failure point, failure point.
Okay, so the what you're
Radiating outward. I just haven't put the other dimensions over here,
okay,
which is how the purely feminine goes. I mean,
right, right.
this is way too interesting. All right, so I don't, where do we get? What do we get out of that? We've well, we're narrowing down on the problem. I mean, it's, so the systemization, how do men systematize? Overload.
We just tell you too many arguments and we statistics. We use,
We just overload you, right? We overload your reason.
right?
I love the shit the women are getting for astrology on the internet. It's fucking
Oh,
killing me.
really?
I don't know how I'm gonna do this. This is gonna be, oh, yeah, okay. So this, they're undermining is the peerage of this. In other words, are undermining and overloading. No, that's coercive. We need emotion here. That's what I've been missing right here.
So emotional functions,
Yeah, I've been missing that.
which is that's loading, right? It's like it's you could say overloading.
Well, we have to go get the equivalent of these over here. So
Mhm.
this is,
Oh, okay.
this might take me some thinking.
Uh,
Because this is the systemization. what do we call
Wait,
it?
so this, it goes to this, it's like emotional, it's like mere suggestion, like, then of actual suggestion, then, there would be touch involved in that physical.
Yeah, this is touch. Yeah, I'm trying not to go with it. That's the answer.
Promise of, right? It's the verbal is promise, right?
This is story. This is a sedation. Not sedation. That's the wrong word. Mollification. And that, you know what is going to happen? Oh my God, I just saw it.
It's a
So
tension.
these will get disambiguated. We'll be able to once we have these,
Yeah.
we'll be able to disambiguate all of them. I can almost see it when I look at this. Because we've got to reduce everything to responsibility. And once we do that, we'll see, where does responsibility go? Where does responsibility go?
Oh, because it's being pushed out.
Yep. So one of the things I'm again, I love some of this manosphere stuff because it's like the best research. So you just interview all these women, and the number, they never take responsibility for anything.
No,
It's always an external factor causing them.
I couldn't have foreseen that. Right?
Was that an ironic statement?
That's how that's how they say it. It was unforeseeable. It is interesting though. It's like, what's interesting is the development of that awareness in a public space, right? On an ongoing basis. So it's like this consciousness is being generated.
It's a people have been given license to say how they feel in the public space, and they're more and more insulated from negative feedback for doing so. So
The cost is low.
the cost is low, so they are explaining how they feel, which is giving us reports, in other words, reported opinions that are less divergent from the truth. So we're getting more truthful responses. This is I'm running out of gas, I think.
Yeah.
This is what we got to work on. Because I think that's right. That's right. I think this is seduction. Which seduction? How is
So it's like
seduction empathy? How methods of expressing seduction.
so that's like this. It's like the emotional is attention seeking.
That's just funny.
there's an escalation there. So it's like the emotional she's seeking attention. Okay, the feminist, right? So that's emotional is expressing interest in attention.
Well, I don't know if that's true. They're all attempts to get attention. That's
No,
what
but it's like this. But it's like this. It's like without saying anything, expressing interest in attention. That I'm paying attention to what you're doing.
Yeah, but we're not talking about the internal. What operation am I implying in order to influence you?
Is you saw her look at you, right? You saw that she's wearing a nice dress, right? That's emotional.
But how does that
gathering your attention.
I don't understand. I agree with that. I just don't know what it has to do with the topic we're looking at.
Because it's like you're being overloaded, emotionally overloaded, without her talking to you or touching you. No, I don't. She's touching you. If that's touch, physical is the operational touch. Okay, I guess you could see it as an escalation function.
Yeah, I mean, I just see that.
Then okay, she's nice to you in the emotional function. She just there's a
That's still an expression. So what she does with emotional regulation is this is conversation. We're talking about methods of argument. And I can see that this is used to physically express the equivalent of that. I can see that this is used to do this.
okay,
And I can see that this is used to do this.
but I don't know what it means in terms of what does that signify? This emotional.
We're talking about overloading.
Okay.
And right.
Okay.
And so I know things that are in here like faith healing, the sequence that begins with faith healing.
Yeah.
All right. That's just sedating your emotions. It's like regulating your emotions.
Okay, so it's emotional overloading then. Okay, I got you.
This is some sort of verbal. So this is some sort of verbal version, which is to say that I like promise is good, which is you're trying to create a verbal construction that generates an offer to the opposition for some sort of gain. And then there's one which is a physical offer to the opposition, which is some sort of physical gain, romantic gain. I think that's I don't know if this one goes here. I think this one might go up here. I don't know where this one goes. I mean, the order of these might be wrong.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I think that's. Oh my God, this is going to be so much fun. Plausible denial. Yeah, I can just bring all that shit over from. Where are you? It's too high level. Faith healing, false promise. That's emotional, right? False promise. That's That's verbal. What's that one?
That right there. There's a social scale.
There's a social to it. Yep. Social scale. There's a ohm that's wonderful. So there's what's this? Yeah, we just can fit the social scale in here too. Oh boy, that's good. Well, I mean, it ends up being the scale. Responsibility. Just empathizing, systematizing, responsibility, time and scale.
Yes.
That's all we got. I'm running out of gas, Brad.
Yes, sir. I thought it was pretty good work.
Do you have anything?
The working session, guys.
I wish we had another day tomorrow.
What?
Well, I just want to be able to continue. I don't know. We did pretty good ramping up and getting over to this today, right?
Yeah, I think so.
I think that's okay. I'll say that.
I was gonna go back to this role reversal premise that we were talking about before, because it goes like this. I was working on this. The issue has to do with the Jewish identity, which is, we've been talking about it, and it has been vilified and defended, and alternatingly so. And it's like there are people who are Jewish people that they vilify the people that we would vilify, and they don't regard those people as real Jews, but they don't exclude them from the identity that they identify with. So they share that identity that is polluted, and it's their responsibility for it to police their own identity.
Well, the problem is their loyalty is greater to the identity than it is to the host population.
Right. So it's like, so they tolerate the pollution, and I guess they will even, I would even say they tolerate the what they would regard as anti-Semitism that is resultant from the pollution. And it is like, so
Badge of honor, and it's self-reinforcing. Not only is a badge of honor if it justifies the ancestral narrative.
it's just doubling down.
It's doubling down. Yeah.
It's just doubling down. So that was dull.
I'm crashing hard, Brad. I gotta go.
It's lunchtime.
Love
All right.
you, brother.
Hit like, hit subscribe, hit the notification bell, leave your comments. Thanks, Kurt.
Thanks, Brad. Great work today.
Yes, sir. Bye-bye.